Communication is the lifeline of any relationship. From the moment we say our first word, all throughout our lives, the way we communicate with others has the power to curate our reality. Now, as you know, communication isn't only verbal, it could also be nonverbal. In fact, my mom is a master at nonverbal communication. I mean, she could tell you 1,000 different things just using her eyes. So there's the "why are you still here" look. There's the "I can't believe you said that in front of guests" look. There's the "you disgust me" look. That's right. She'd make you do things without uttering a single word. Now, although I'm nowhere as skilled as my mom is when it comes to nonverbal communication, I do, however, like to think that she and I share the same communication style. You see, unlike my dad, who's a very quiet and reserved person, my mom is very upfront, which is a nice way of saying she has no filter. Now, if she feels a certain way about you, she would let you know on the spot. And I actually really admire this about her. And just like my mom, the people who know me closely would hopefully tell you that I'm a candid person. Whether in my professional or my personal relationships, I never ever want to feel like I'm manipulating people to get what I want. So I try my best to be honest and forthright with people. In fact, I have a simple rule. That rule is be honest or be quiet. Now, this rule sounds nice, doesn't it? It does sound nice. But the problem is it doesn't always work. You see, because sometimes I'm faced with situations where I don't want to lie, but I also can't stay quiet at the same time. Yes, because life is not as black and white as we want it to be. There's a lot of gray area. So it becomes tricky. Now, hoping that it would provide me with some much needed wisdom, I resorted to a book which I'm sure most of you have read, a book titled How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a book by Dale Carnegie. I call it the Bible of communication. I was particularly interested in figuring out a way where I can maintain my assertive way of communication while still taking people's feelings into consideration. And that book did not disappoint. I don't consider myself as an avid reader whatsoever. I mean, I try to read a few books here and there, but I'm not as disciplined as I want to be. In fact, there are times where I read a book cover to cover and completely forget all about it. But there were a few key concepts that stood out to me from this particular book. The first one is people are not interested in you. People are interested in themselves. So when you communicate with others, the book suggests that you always try to look at things from the other person's point of view. So instead of thinking of what you want, try to think of what the other person wants first. That is, unless you're dealing with women, in which case, don't be so hard on yourself because women themselves don't know what they want. Now, the second concept has to do with criticism. So just like a dentist administers anesthesia before carrying out any procedure, when you criticize, the book suggests that you always start with a praise. That way, your words won't sting as much. Now, thirdly, thanks to this book, I realized the importance of evolving or adapting one's communication style to fit other people's style. Now, as part of my job, I provide IT trainings, and I don't know if you noticed this about me, but I'm a very energetic person. And so I noticed that it often catches people off guard. In fact, my first sessions with my students usually go with them trying to figure out whether I'm on drugs or not. So I have since been practicing a more soft and mellow approach. Now, as great as it was to get all of this insight from this amazing book, I have to say that it does not compare with the personalized feedback that I receive from the people around me, especially my students and the people that I work with. It's like they have the ability to quickly identify areas where there's room for improvement. And I have to say that accepting feedback and diligently working on them has worked wonders for me in my professional life. Now, when it comes to personal relationships, as you all know, or may not know, I'm not romantically involved with anyone at the moment. But when that day comes, I recognize that my way of communication will have to evolve yet again. You see, after the many horror stories that married men have told me, I fear that my rule about being honest or staying quiet, you know that rule I was telling you about earlier? I feel like that rule will be rendered useless or rendered obsolete. Why? Because I understand as a married man, you have to learn to say sorry when you don't know what you have done wrong. You have to learn to tell your wife that she's a good cook, even though you know you can do better with a 2-day lesson from your mom. You have to learn to tell your wife she's beautiful, even though she looks like she's training for the heavyweight division. Now, in all seriousness, upon this personal analysis, I've discovered that there's no one best way of communication. Although we may have our preferred approach, in many cases, we have to be willing enough to adapt to new circumstances and other people's style of communication. I've also realized that mastering the art of communication is not a destination. There's always something new to learn, something new to explore. And although I like to think that I've come a long way in my communication journey, I do believe that it is and will always be a work in progress.